The stories of Mahabharata, retold by Sudipta, Bhawmik. Welcome, dear friends, to another episode of The Stories of Mahabharata. In the last episode, we heard how Yudhishthir killed Shalya on the 18th day of the war. We also heard how Bhim crushed Duryodhana's thighs and left him to die on the banks of the lake Dwaipayan. After the Pandavas had left, Aswathama, Kripacharya, and Kritavarma returned to the banks of Lake Dwaipayan, where Duryodhana lay unconscious. Aswathama brought some water from the lake and sprinkled it on Duryodhana. Gently, he cleaned the blood and grime from his face and body. Slowly, Duryodhana regained consciousness, and as his senses became active, he cried in pain. Aswathama couldn't hold back his tears. The heir to the throne of Hastinapur, the great king Duryodhana, was lying helpless in the dust and writhing in pain, and nobody to care for him. He could have never imagined witnessing such a horrific and tragic scene. Aswathama said, "O king, my heart breaks to see you in such a condition. Tell me, how can I be of any service to you?" With great difficulty, Duryodhana lifted his torso using his elbows as support. The Pandavas tricked me and defeated me using unfair means. Avenge me if you can. That's all I ask of you. If you allow me, tonight I will kill the Pandavas and the Panchals. That is a promise, said Aswathama, fuming in rage. Duryodhana turned towards Kripacharya and said, "Gurudev, please fetch a pot of water. I want to consecrate the appointment of Aswathama as the next commander-in-chief of the Kaurava army." Kripacharya brought some water in an earthen pot, and Aswathama was appointed as the next commander-in-chief. Go and fulfill your promise," muttered Duryodhana while trying to hide his pain. I pray you return victorious." Aswathama bowed to Duryodhana and mounted his horse. Kripacharya and Kritavarma followed him, and the three warriors galloped towards Kurukshetra, leaving behind Duryodhana, awaiting his death. At nightfall, they reached a dense forest and decided to rest a while and work out a plan to attack the Pandavas. They sat down under a huge banyan tree, and within moments, Kripacharya and Kritavarma fell asleep. Aswathama, however, couldn't sleep. He racked his brain thinking about ways to overpower and kill the Pandavas and the Panchals. Suddenly, he heard the crows in the branches overhead crying out loud and fluttering their wings. Aswathama looked up and saw a huge black owl on one of the branches. The owl attacked the crow's nest and was killing the sleeping babies at will. The crows woke up and tried to defend their children, but the ruthless owl was on a killing spree and within minutes killed numerous birds before merging into the night sky. The scene gave Aswathama goosebumps. This was the way to destroy his enemy. He'd attack the Pandava camp at night while they were asleep. He'd enter the camp and kill the sleeping Panchals and the Pandavas and keep his promise. He woke up Kripacharya and Kritavarma and told them the details of his plan. Kripa and Kritavarma were flabbergasted and couldn't speak for a few moments. Kripa stood up and said, "This is an outrageous plan. I don't know how could you even think of such a cowardly act. This is so unlike you. I suggest you have a good night's sleep and clear your head. Tomorrow we'll think of something more honorable to achieve victory." Aswathama was furious. "How can I sleep when my king lies in his deathbed and cries in pain? I cannot rest without avenging King Duryodhan. I cannot rest without killing Dhristyadumna. You need to understand, tomorrow the Pandavas and Panchals will be protected by Krishna and Arjun, and we won't be able to touch even a strand of their hair." Kripa tried to say something, but Aswathama stopped him. "Fine. You don't have to enter the camp and do anything. I will do whatever is necessary, and if I need to, I will suffer the consequences with no regrets." Aswathama mounted his horse and galloped away towards the Pandava camp. Kripacharya and Kritavarma stood perplexed for a while, not knowing what to do. Kripa said to Kritavarma, "I think we shouldn't leave him alone. We don't have to enter the camp with him, but outside the camp, we should protect him from any attacks." Kritavarma agreed. They mounted their horses and followed Aswathama at a distance. Yudhishthir was despairing that evening. What had the war given him? Victory, of course. But at what cost? People whom he loved, respected, people whose company he enjoyed, were all dead. With whom could he share his glory? He said to his brothers, "Tonight, I don't feel like sleeping in the camp. I want to go somewhere peaceful, maybe by the banks of the river, and sleep under the open sky. Would you like to join me?" The brothers agreed. Krishna agreed to accompany them too. They mounted their chariots and went to a peaceful place by the river bank and lay down to rest on the sand. Aswathama stood on the margins of the Pandava camp and looked for the right place to enter. It seemed the Pandavas, having been assured of victory, hardly had any guards around the camp. Only one man stood at the entrance. The rest of the camp was silent. Aswathama decided to enter the camp right from the main entrance. At that moment, Kripacharya and Kritavarma arrived and stood next to him. "Good that you have decided to come," whispered Aswathama. "You stay outside, and if anybody tries to escape, kill them." Aswathama alighted from his horse, covered his head in a cloak, and walked towards the camp with an open sword in hand. Quietly, he arrived at the gate and with a quick swish of his sword, killed the half-asleep guard. He then entered the camp and looked for Dhristyadumna's tent. The Panchal's prince's tent wasn't difficult to find. Aswathama stepped into the tent and found Dhristyadumna sleeping on his bed, looking at his father's killers peacefully asleep. Aswathama's blood boiled. He held Dhristyadumna by his hair and yanked him off his bed. Dhristyadumna woke up, but before he could raise an alarm, Aswathama placed his feet on his mouth and pressed hard. Dhristyadumna realized his time had come. He held Aswathama's feet and muttered, "Kill me with your weapon and let me go to the heavens." "Never! You don't deserve to go to the heavens," growled Aswathama. He placed his hand on Aswathama's chest and pressed so hard that Dhristyadumna's chest got crushed, killing him instantly. Aswathama then saw the 5 brothers sleeping. He yanked one of the brothers by his hair and with a swift strike decapitated him. The noise woke up the other 4, and Aswathama realized that they weren't the Pandava brothers but the sons of Draupadi. But that didn't stop him. Before the startled brothers could defend themselves, Aswathama killed them all. By then, the word about Aswathama's raid had spread inside the camp, and the warriors scrambled to defend themselves. But Aswathama was indomitable, like death himself. He killed them indiscriminately. Those who tried to flee the camp got killed by Kripacharya and Kritavarma's arrows. Aswathama continued his rampage inside the camp. He then went to the stable and killed all the horses and elephants without any mercy. Finally, when there was nobody left to challenge him, Aswathama walked out of the camp, mounted his horse, and along with Kripacharya and Kritavarma, rode back towards the Dwaipayan lake, where Duryodhan lay wounded. Duryodhan was still alive when Aswathama arrived. He was spitting out blood while frantically trying to shoo away the hungry predators. Aswathama knelt before him and said, "My king, I wasn't able to kill the Pandavas, but I have killed the 5 sons of Draupadi. I have also killed Dhristyadumna and many other Panchal and Pandava warriors. I know this is not enough, but at least I could avenge my father." Duryodhan was overjoyed to hear this. "You have achieved what our great warriors like Bhishma, Drona, and Karna have failed to achieve," he said, trying hard to raise his head. Now I can die in peace." And then Duryodhan stopped speaking and dropped dead on the banks of the lake. The messengers ran to Yudhishthir and delivered the terrible news of the massacre. Yudhishthir's knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground unconscious. His brothers, overwhelmed with grief, gathered around and tried to console him. A little later, Yudhishthir regained consciousness, tears rolling down his eyes. He said, "We won the war, yet we lost. Our sons escaped the wrath of great warriors like Bhishma, Drona, and Karna, but succumbed to Aswathama. It is our fault that we left him alive." I don't know how Draupadi is going to take this news. Nakul, you go and fetch Draupadi to the camp. The rest of us will leave right now. When Yudhishthir stepped into the camp, he saw the dead bodies of his sons and friends strewn all around. He almost collapsed again. With great difficulty, he controlled himself and sat down in a corner with his brothers. Krishna stood by his side, but didn't utter a single word. Draupadi came running, and the moment she saw her sons' decapitated bodies, she dropped to the ground. Bhim helped her get up. Draupadi touched each of her sons' bodies. They were still warm. She turned towards Yudhishthir and wiped off her tears. "What price for victory, my king?" she said. You were too complacent with your victory and forgot that you haven't yet completed your job. Now listen to me. If you can't kill Aswathama by the end of the day, I will fast unto death. Yudhishthir tried to reason with Draupadi. Don't lament for your sons or your brother. They died an ideal Kshatriya death and have gone to the heavens. Don't give me any excuses, yelled Draupadi. She turned towards Bhim and said, Bhimsen, Aswathama carries a gemstone embedded in his forehead. Kill him and bring me the gemstone. I know only you can, and you will do this for me. Bhim immediately mounted his chariot and left to find Aswathama with Nakul as his charioteer. After Bhim left, Krishna said to Yudhishthir, why did you let Bhim go alone? You and Arjun should have accompanied him. Yudhishthir was confused. You know Bhim, Aswathama is no match for him. I'm sure he'll find Aswathama and kill him. Krishna wasn't happy with the answer. You underestimated Aswathama, and for that you had to pay a high price. His father, Drona, taught him to use the deadly Brahmasir weapon. When fired, it can destroy the entire earth. Drona also taught the use of this weapon to Arjun. Drona, of course, had instructed both his students not to use this weapon ever, especially on humans. But I doubt a desperate Aswathama would abide by his father's words. I think it would be wise of you and Arjun to go and help Bhim. If Aswathama uses the Brahmasir weapon, only Arjun can counter it. Yudhishthir and Arjun mounted Krishna's chariot, and the three drove in the direction where Bhim went. Soon they caught up with Bhim and joined him in his frantic search for Aswathama. They found Aswathama sitting on the banks of river Ganga with a group of sages. When Aswathama saw Bhim and Arjun, he panicked. He had no weapons in hand, but to activate the Brahmasir, he didn't need any physical weapon. He remembered his father had told him not to use this weapon against any human, but he had no option. He ripped out a blade of grass from the ground, uttered a mantra, and threw it up, saying, "Let the Brahmasir destroy the Pandavas." The weapon flared up, and with a huge roar, it blasted towards the sky to launch a strike against the Pandavas. Screaming at the top of his voice, Krishna said, "Arjun, fire your Brahmasir now and counter Aswathama's strike. Otherwise, we all will die along with thousands of your people." Arjun picked up an arrow, loaded it on his bow, and shot it up in the sky, activating the Brahmasir by uttering the mantra. The arrow transformed into a ball of fire and shot up into the sky to counter Aswathama's weapon. The gods and the sages panicked. Vyasa appeared between the two weapons and stalled them. Angry at Aswathama and Arjun, he said, "Why did you fire the Brahmasir? Didn't you know it is a crime to fire it against humans? Retract your weapons immediately." I fired it to counter Aswathama's strike and to protect our people," said Arjun. "However, I can't disobey you. I will retract my weapon. Please ask Aswathama to do the same." Arjun uttered a mantra to retract the Brahmasir. Aswathama said, "I was scared to see Bhim and Arjun and fired the weapon only as a last resort to protect myself. Hand over the gemstone on your forehead to Bhim, and they will let you leave," said Vyasa. "But before anything, you must retract your weapon." Aswathama nodded and said, "Oh, great Rishi Vyasa, this gem is more precious than my life. However, I can't disregard your command, and I will give my gem to Bhim. But I don't know how to retract the Brahmasir weapon. So it needs to strike something. I will retarget it at the wombs of the Pandava women, and it will kill their unborn children. Vyasa agreed. But the Pandavas and Krishna were furious. Krishna said, "You are a coward, Aswathama. You have committed several sins and now you want to kill unborn babies. I curse you. You will live for 3,000 years, but your life will be one of endless pain and suffering. And let me tell you this, your weapon may kill the unborn children in the wombs of the Pandava women. But I will revive Abhimanyu's wife Uttara's child, and he will rule the Kuru kingdom for 60 long years." "I accept your curse, Krishna," said Aswathama. He pulled out his knife, cut out the gemstone from his forehead, and gave it to Bhim. Then he stood up and walked away to live a long and painful life of 3,000 years. Yudhishthir, Bhim, Arjun, and Krishna returned to the camp. Bhim handed the gem to Draupadi and said, "We defeated the murderer of your sons. Here, take Aswathama's gemstone. I hope it gives you peace." Draupadi stood up with the gem in hand and said, "Thank you, Bhim." She turned to Yudhishthir and said, "O king, I would like you to wear this gem on your crown to remind everybody that the Pandavas never forgive those who harm their family." Saying this, Draupadi broke down in tears. The Pandava brothers stood by silently.
The Stories of Mahabharata is written, directed, and told by Sudipta Bhawmik. Audio engineering, original music, and sound design by Avi Ziv. Find us online at facebook.com/Mahabharata Podcast. Join the group for updates and news. Subscribe to the podcast using iTunes or any other podcast catcher. On Twitter, we are at Mahabharat Audio.